Thank you. I'm going to try to explain the issue in a way that you will be able to teach it yourself if you want to. I want to give you that level of knowledge that you'll be able to go to someone else and teach this. I've been teaching this for a lot of years, and I keep changing the presentation to try to make it simpler and simpler and simpler. And we'll see tonight if I succeed at that. At the end, we'll have the fun part, which is the questions and answers, and perhaps a little bit of debate. So before we start, how many people in the room here, you normally carry one of these with you, a pocket constitution? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. All right, so if you don't have one, we have pocket constitutions to give you this evening. So if anyone wants a pocket constitution, raise your hand. And Jerry, you want to help out? You got one? Good. We want you to have a pocket constitution. Now, one of the handouts that I gave you the one that has the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto on it. Yeah. The purpose of that is this. What I do is I carry this as a bookmark in my Constitution. So if you cut it out and you fold it, don't cut the middle part, just fold it over. You'll have the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto on one side, and you'll have the 7 ingredients of Venezuelan socialism on the other. So why is that in there? Why is that in with the Constitution? Because when somebody is proposing something, it's good if you really know your Constitution, and you'll say, well, that's unconstitutional. But if you know these, you know where it came from. So like in 1913, when they passed the income tax and they passed the Federal Reserve Act, those are right out of the Communist Manifesto, right? And in fact, in some way or another, all 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto were passed in the U.S. We're not going to go into it tonight, but all 10 planks, in some form or other, were passed in the U.S. in the 20th century. Okay, so that's why you want to have this in there. So what you do is fold it in half and use it as a bookmark. Okay, so prior to the 2020 election, myself and my compatriot, Jerry, we were sign waving, and this was the sign that we made up, and we were waving. Your choice 2020. Right? To get the message across to people what was going on. Right? So, my opinion, and my opinion is that Trump was in fact elected, certainly was elected in Florida. And so after they announced that he was not going to become the president, we had another sign made up, similar, but more to the point. You voted for this, and each state gave you that. Nothing has changed since then. We still have this. That's what we have. So what are we going to do about it? So if I was to ask everyone in this room, what's your priority? And I've done this, I won't do it tonight, but I've done it often. I'm always going to get a different answer from every single person. Right, but I'm going to suggest that there's 3 things that are very important. One is the border, one is election integrity, and one is absolutely positively we do not need a new constitutional convention. Right? So, I'm going to try to give you this. When you run for office, it's important to have a good stump speech. So what do you need? First thing you need is an elevator speech. An elevator speech is a speech that you're going up to someone in an elevator, you're in an elevator with someone and you got to get to your platform by the time it gets to the top. It's that 20, 30-second speech that you address your issue. Then you want about a 3-minute version of that, 2 to 3-minute version. Then you want something that does not exceed 17 minutes. Right? That's about most people's total span of attention if you're lucky. All right, so let me give you on this topic, before I do that, I want to just fill in a little more of the context. So Mark Twain, his 2 famous quotes, you probably heard them both. One of Mark Twain's quotes is, Mark Twain was a newspaper man in his early career. He said, if you read the newspaper, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. So I'm gonna just give you a little codicil to that. Now I'm gonna say, if you did not go to school and you're not self-educated, you're uneducated. But if you did go to school, you're miseducated. So, and I'm going to, as we go along, I'm going to support that a little bit. Another thing Mark Twain said was, it's easier to fool a man than it is to convince him that he's been fooled. And it's true. If you ever try to do it, you'll see it's true. When they do not want to admit that they made a mistake, even to themselves. Okay. So, I've been trying to cut this presentation down shorter and shorter, so I'm going to give you about a 2-minute version of it, which is 3 paragraphs of 4 that I gave to our local representatives in Sarasota County about 2 weeks ago. I was talking to Joe Reuters, to Mr. Grant, who's the representative down here also, am I correct? He was there, James Buchanan and Fiona McFarland. So, I'm just going to read this. Now, you can read along with me. I gave you a copy just specifically so you can read along with me in case I slur my words. My New York accent makes it hard to understand. All right? So, this is just a history lesson. Starting on May 25th, 1787, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia came together at the direction of Congress, which had instructed them to amend the Articles of Confederation. Instead, they proceeded to make their proceedings secret, disregard the provisions of the Articles of Confederation and the instructions of their individual state legislatures, and to write a totally new constitution, complete with a new and easier method of ratification. Now that's what happened. That's how we got the Constitution that we just gave out. That's how we got it. The convention's actions made it clear that constitutional conventions have more power than all 3 branches of the federal government combined. As an example of this is the Fourth Foundation's proposed Constitution for the new states of America, which was written at a cost of about $30 million over a 10-year period. And it's about 50 pages. It's available online. You can pull it down and read it. And it does away with the current states and replaces them with a maximum of 20 new states. So when we get into some of the legislation, some of the legislation that was passed in Florida that become more relevant. The Florida legislature has on numerous occasions applied to Congress to call an Article 5 convention. Further, in 2014, it passed Florida Statutes 11.93, the Article 5 Constitutional Convention Act. The totality of these actions is a grave list of a total rewrite of our Constitution, including the abolition of the Bill of Rights, and to put our nation at risk of no longer being an independent nation. Now, I cut this thing down to put bare bones because I knew it was only, we were supposed to have 3 minutes to speak, and I was able to deliver this in another paragraph in 2.5 minutes because as we went along, they cut down the amount of time speakers have to speak. So, the rest of the presentation, or the next part of the presentation, I'm going to give you some more details that are just going to show you how this would likely happen again. In other words, if they call a new constitutional convention, in my opinion, you can kiss the Bill of Rights goodbye. All right, so I'm going to prove that out to you by looking at the law. So take a look at this. Take a look at this right here where it says Article 5. Right? And we see that Article 5 is in the upper left-hand corner. Article 5. Right. Article 5 is only one sentence. It's a run-on sentence, but it's one sentence. And you'll see Article 7 is one short sentence. So there's 4 pieces of law that we need to look at. Article 5, Article 7, then Article 1, Section 8, the first sentence and the last sentence, and then one sentence from the Declaration of Independence, and possibly Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation. So let's start out with Article 5. What I did here is I drew lines and I cut the sentence, the one sentence in Article 5 into 3 sections. Right? The first section talks about how the legislatures apply. So whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall oppose amendments to the Constitution or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution. So that gives the 2 methods, you're giving 2 methods of changing the Constitution. One is the way we have the 27 current amendments. Both houses of Congress have 2/3 vote, and they send it out to the legislatures for ratification. Or they can send it out to the states' conventions in the states for ratification. And there's a big difference there. When ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions of 3/4 thereof, as one of the other modes of ratification may be proposed by the Congress. So the ratification procedure is either by the state legislatures or it's by a convention. Now, if we go back to the Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation, what that called for ratification by all 13 states. In other words, if every state didn't apply, didn't ratify, it wasn't ratified. It had to be 100%. So Rhode Island never even sent delegates to the Constitutional Convention. If you look at your pocket Constitution, if it has the signatories there with their states, you'll note that it's not signed by anyone from Rhode Island. That's because they didn't even bother showing up, because they felt if we don't like it, we just won't ratify it, it won't go into effect. Right? But they didn't know that the delegates were going to just forget about their instructions and write a whole new constitution. So what made it legal for them to do that? How was it legal for them not to follow their instructions and not follow Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation? What made it legal for them is just look at the second page on the bottom of the second page where it says Declaration of Independence, first two sentences. Right? And you see the operative words are, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government. So what they did was they said, listen, we're not going to amend the Articles of Confederation. We have under the Declaration of Independence, we have the right to go in, abolish the government, and basically create a new government. And that's exactly what they did. And that's what the founders did. Now, think about the men who were at that convention. We're talking about moral guys who, a number of them were geniuses. Certainly Thomas Jefferson was a genius. I mean, if you read his life, I mean, the guy was beyond brilliant. They had the best interest of the country at heart. Now, how do you think that would play out with Schumer? Or, who's the new guy? The new guy we got?
McCarthy.
What is it?
McCarthy,
yeah. Now, I used to do this, it used to be Schumer and Pelosi. How do you think it would play out with them? Do you think they would hold themselves to the same standards that the founders held themselves to? Some of you may remember back after the Second Iraq War, the Iraqis were writing a constitution, and the Bush administration gave them advice, and the Bush administration said to them, well, you shouldn't put in a Bill of Rights. Ours gives us nothing but trouble. Right, so if that's what you get from the Bush administration, what do you get from Schumer? So, all right, so I just want to prove out some of the, I wanted to substantiate a few of the things that were said. If you look at Article 7, just as ratification of the Convention of the 9 states will be sufficient for establishment of this Constitution, ratifying the same. So what they did was ratification of the conventions of 9 states. So the Articles of Confederation said the legislatures of all 13 states. So why did they do that? They not only changed the number of states, they also changed the method of ratification. And the reason is it's believed politically it's easier to get things ratified through a convention than it is to get them ratified through the state legislature. So they gave themselves a double advantage to ratification. And I think they declared it ratified after 10 states, and the government was running for about 2 or 3 years before Rhode Island finally signed on to it. All right, so how do we know? Now I'm going to start debunking some of the false information out there. There's 3 outfits that are, over years there's been kind of 12 outfits or more that have been trying to get a new constitutional convention. And in some form or other they've been trying to get one since we founded the country. They almost got one. I think there were only 2 states short in the early 80s, and they were marketing it to the left. And then what happened was states started repealing their calls for the Constitutional Convention, And Florida was one of those. Florida had a call for a constitutional convention and then repealed it. And then they changed their strategy. They said, we're not going to market this to the left, we'll market this to the right. And they came up with two issues they thought they could get to fly, but not just those issues. And there's a third group that they're still marketing to the left. So the two issues were balanced budget amendment and term limits. Right? So, and there's basically two organizations that primarily concern themselves with that. And then there's one on the left. There's a George Soros-funded group called Wolfpack. And they got calls from 5 states. And they have different issues where they want a constitutional convention. It's not those two issues. I'm trying to think what it is. Hawaii tried to put one through for get rid of the Second Amendment, but it didn't pass. It passed one house, but not the other. But if you go on Wolfpack's website, it's on there. I read it a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember what their rationale was. Some of you may have gotten something like this in the mail. This was given to me by one of my members. A woman who's just top-notch. She's 93 years old. She works me under the table. She was the head of a Florida-wide family organization. I forget the name of it. And she's just amazing. She just keeps going. She's like the Duracell rabbit. And she has all these coffees at her house with all the politicians. She hosts in her home all of these meetings. She's great. And she gave me these, I was driving back from a meeting behind her car, and she had a sticker on from an outfit called U.S. Term Limits on her bumper sticker. I called her up. I said, Esther, what are you doing? I said, you know who these guys are? They want to do a constitutional convention. She said, what? And I know she gave them money. Well, what did they do? They put out, they have like a two-pronged attack. U.S. Term Limits puts out expensive pieces like this, right? And they talk about term limits. And that's what I show you. So there's pages and pages of stuff. This is not cheap to produce. These kind of mailings, they come out of Washington, D.C. So they're doing this nationally. So, the other group is more of a grassroots group. It's called Convention of States. And they used to, I think they stopped it, but for a while, they were trying to convince people, if you spoke to their membership, they would tell you that, no, a Convention of States is different than a constitutional convention. They tell you it's not the same thing. But there's only one Article 5 in the Constitution. So, a couple of times I debated them. The first time was about 3-4 years ago up in the Manatee Tea Party. And when we started getting into the facts, the guy, I couldn't believe it, he actually took out a guitar and started singing. Kind of like, I'm a good old boy, I wouldn't see you wrong. And then the second time was at the Northport Republican Club. And in both occasions, the speaker is supposed to debate didn't show up, and a different speaker showed up. It was a nice lady. She got up, and her presentation was basically, I've been a lifelong conservative, trust me. I mean, that was it. I couldn't believe it. They really didn't engage me on the facts at all. The reason is because they know they can't win on the facts. So they'll win on something else. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. And I'm going to open the floor up to questions. Oh, one of the things that I want to talk about, this is the part I like. I want to bring something to your attention as far as context. In the 1800s, you were expected in grammar school, like a one-room schoolhouse, you were expected to be able to debate and defend your point. That was part of education. A Another example of the same concept is, like when I was in New York, the Orthodox Jews, they study something called the Talmud. I don't know, how many people know what the Talmud is? Anybody? 1, 2 people? Okay, 3. All right, so if you look at the Talmud in book form, it's going to be like that. It's basically kind of looks like the Encyclopedia Britannica. I had 2 friends of mine who were Orthodox rabbis, and they had read it through 3 times each. And they would read 3 hours a day for 7 and the 3rd years with someone on the other end of the phone who was reading along with them. And it takes 7 and 3rd years to read it through once. These guys had read it through 3 times, so that's 22 years of reading 3 hours a day. But what they would do in those communities is this. We wanted to study a book together. The method of study was this. You would take the book, and we'd take a page or section, and I would take one point of view on a particular issue, and then the person I was studying with would take the opposing point of view, and then we debated until we got as much out as we could, and then we would switch. If you were on the affirmative and I was on the negative, I'd become the negative and you'd be the affirmative, and we debated again. And what was the purpose of that? The purpose of it was so that you looked at the issue from every angle that you could possibly look at it from. When you debate, you learn. Look, debating is a learning technique. So it was a technique that was taught in grammar school in this country in 2 centuries ago. And when I was at Toastmasters about 4 years ago, I said, you know, let me see where there's publicly, I wanted to start up a debating club. And I said, let me see where there's a publicly available dating club, a debating club open to the public. So I went on the internet and I started doing searches. And then I found one in Southern England. I found the Toastmasters Club in Tokyo. And then finally, after about 6 months, I found a publicly available debating club in Toronto, Canada. And I was unable to find one in the US. Maybe there is one somewhere. But it's not, debating is not encouraged in our country. Listening and obeying, that's what's encouraged. All right, with that said, I'm not on a rabbit track there. I'm open the floor to questions, and I'm sure people have heard about this issue before. I'll take this one lady first.
So, doesn't any collection of the people that are capable of obtaining the consent of their constituents have the same rights as the Constitutional Convention? Doesn't any collection of the people who are capable of obtaining the consent of their constituents have the same rights as the Constitutional Convention?
Good question. Okay, the answer is this. The delegates of the Constitutional Convention consider themselves to be the sovereign representatives of the people. So those delegates on the British common law are considered to be like the people. In other words, they represent you. However they got to be there, even if they were appointed by Schumer, in theory, they represent you. So they are the people. That's why they have more power than the other branches of government, is because they are the sovereign representatives. They have the ability to create a new government from scratch.
So to clarify though,
Yes.
do you need a call if such a group exists?
Okay, so you need a call. Well, under Article 5, it says that 2/3 of the states must apply.
But under the Declaration of Independence, the rights of the people. So
Correct.
if the people have the
That's
capable of
correct.
obtaining the consent, do they even need a call?
So if I understand what you said can the people decide to call one on their own?
No, if you have a collection of people capable of obtaining the consent of their peers, don't they have the same right?
Was to have a new constitutional convention, 1912 Socialist Party platform. So why do they want a new constitution? They hate the Constitution. They want to get rid of it. That's the reason they want a new constitutional convention. It's that simple. And they do what they always do. They deceive. Right? They come up with some rationale. Now, you notice I didn't go into the merits of term limits. I didn't go to the merits of a balanced budget amendment, right? Because we could talk about that for a week or two, right? Especially, I mean, we have to have a whole course on currency to understand why a balanced budget amendment may not be the best thing in the world. Right? Conservatives think, well, yeah, I have to balance my budget, should reflect the government balance its budget. And if we were dealing with constitutional money, that would be true. But we're dealing with this fiat currency that's loaned into existence, and I can't go down that rabbit trail because that's a whole other, just to even scratch the surface, that's an hour or two. Okay, next. Who's up? Yes. David.
Who gets to be the Constitutional Convention? What's the method for picking that convention?
Okay. Very good question. Thank you for asking.
What is the question?
Okay, I'm sorry.
What was his question?
Oh, well, his question is, what is the method of picking the delegates to a constitutional convention? Is that correct? Okay. Okay, so the answer to that is, and you go back to this one, on the first page, and when it says Article 5 on the top. Go back to the first page where it says Article 1, Section 8, Powers of Congress. And if you look at, I believe I have both of which is, let me flip over. Yeah, okay, it's 2 parts. All right, so there's the first sentence and there's the last sentence in Article 8. If you look at your Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8 is really the powers, it was 90% of plus of the powers of Congress. And when it was written, it was all of the powers of Congress and the government. And except for Article 5 and 1 or 2 other things, and then the 14th Amendment. All right, so Congress shall have the power to levy, collect taxes, duty, imposts, excises, to pay debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties and impost excises shall be uniform throughout the states. And then they have the power to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department thereof. So that's called the necessary and proper clause, and that says that Congress shall, anything that's in the Constitution that's actually constitutional, like Article 5, Congress shall have the power to regulate that, which means write all the laws. So Congress can totally decide how the delegates are selected. They can totally decide how the votes are counted. Congress can turn around and say, okay, well, we're going to make the delegates Congress because we were already elected, so we're the delegates. And then they would be able to take their limited power and turn it into basically unlimited power. Because Article 1, Section 8. So they can make it whatever they want. That's the answer. And what else we got? Well, there's got to be someone here who's... Okay, oh, we got good. Okay, well, all right, this young lady.
In response to what the young woman over here said, when you're saying we the people, if you were to gather enough people independent of any convention or any legislature or whatever, would they then not have the power to amend or rewrite the Constitution? In a way, yes, because I believe that you will correct me our Constitution was written because the delegates did not follow what they were commissioned to do. What they did instead was to say that because of the times and because of the need that we have, because at that time they could not perform the things they needed to do to run the government, they said it was necessary for them to find another way to be able to write the Constitution. And so what they decided, as you said, they decided that we the people is a greater power than the legislatures or any state government. So on the platform that they are representatives, as you said, of the people, they have the power to supersede the commissions that they were given and to write the Constitution. Is that not true?
Well, that was the contention, yes. But I believe her question was something different. She was saying something totally different. She was saying that the people got together and wanted to bring things into the proper perspective and actually either follow the Constitution or make some changes to it, that they would have the theoretical right to do that, which they have the theoretical right, but there's no real way that they can do it.
So you hit my question right on the head. That's exactly the question, which is to say that any body capable of obtaining that consent could appeal not to the Constitution, not to Article 5 or Article 8 or Article whatever, Article 7, go straight to the Declaration of Independence and say, based on this, we can alter it, abolish it, institute a new government, we're starting from scratch. So that right, that capability exists today just as much as it did then, though perhaps they had smaller spheres of influence and a smaller number of people could obtain a larger degree of consent. And today you would need either a much larger group or a much more influential group to obtain that same level of consent. I think that's still as possible, maybe not from a realistic perspective. Where do you find people with that kind of following today? But technically feasible.
Yeah, you're right. And technically, that's what the founders said. However,
How are you going to keep going?
No, she's saying it's theoretical.
Right, when it's other halves.
Yeah, she's saying
Theoretically, yeah, I get it, yeah.
Theoretical. It's theoretical. Yes, sir.
Federal Reserve is illegal. Right? The Supreme Court of the United States, there were 14 states who wanted to vote for the Supreme Court to ask for relief in the 2020 election. And what happened was, the SCOTUS just said they had no standing, which is totally against the Constitution. And there's no way to go ahead and correct that. They just avoided the whole deal. They didn't want to get involved.
Okay, so let's talk about SCOTUS for a minute. We're going to go up rapid track, but I think it's worth going up. How many people are familiar with Marbury versus Madison? 1, 2, 3, good. 6, 7. All right, so Marbury versus Madison, I'll admit I have a strong opinion on it. And my strong opinion is it was wrongly decided. All right, so we don't have time to go into the whole case, but I advise you there's actually a good video out there by a professor young female professor, at least she was young at the time the video was made. I think it was from the University of Virginia, or it was a university in Virginia. And she talks about the case from a very factual standpoint. And when you look at the facts and you read it, it's a good case to read too. You can pull it down on the internet. And I'll just kind of like summarize it. What happened was Marbury had received, he was supposed to receive a commission to be a justice of the peace. And the secretary, I believe it was the Secretary of State at the time, I believe, which was John Marshall. Everyone thought that, they thought Adams was going to be reelected, and he was not. And Thomas Jefferson took over. So they made a last-minute rush, like many times happened, to try to appoint other buddies to positions before the new government came in. But we're talking back in the days of handwritten documents and horses as far as transportation. So Marbury didn't get his commission on time. So now John Marshall is now the Chief Justice instead of being Secretary of State, and he's the person presiding over the case and who ended up writing up the case. So he had a conflict of interest right there, but that wasn't the worst part about it. The Constitution, as you read it, doesn't say who will interpret it. It's not in there. In that case, the Supreme Court usurped the power to decide what the Constitution means. So how did they do that? When he wrote up, it was very tricky because Thomas Jefferson and the Congress both totally disagreed with their opinion. But the way he wrote, there was 3 parts to the decision. In one of the parts, he wrote that the Supreme Court had the power to decide the case. But because he ruled against Marbury on technical grounds, there was no operational thing. It wasn't, he didn't rule that Marbury has to get his commission, because if he did that, the president wouldn't give it to him, the Congress would have backed him up. He just ruled that the Supreme Court had the power to do it, but there was no operational change. So the president said, I disagree with that. I believe each of the houses should be their own judge of what's constitutional. And it was known that he was supported in the Congress. And then nothing happened for about 40 years. And it was either the first or the second case that the Supreme Court decided to exercise that right again. I believe was the Dred Scott case, which is decried today. But at the time, that's when they said, we have the power to decide. They said, well, based upon Marbury versus Madison, what we decided. So, right off the bat, that was the first major, that the Supreme Court gave itself a dramatic amount of more power by usurpation. So, when we complain about the Supreme Court, it's because the Congress and the President never stood up and said, guess what, you don't have that power. Now, whether or not they should have it or not, if they should have it, it would require a constitutional amendment, not their own court decision. But that's what we're living with today. And that's not the only legacy thing. I mean, like you said, the Federal Reserve Act is unconstitutional, clearly. I mean, the Constitution mandates gold and silver is the only one.
It's a very, very good book called A Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
Jekyll Island. It's a story of how the Federal Reserve came to be. And it's important of exactly what we're suffering today.
Did everyone hear that? He's talking about The Creature of Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. It's about 600 and change pages, but it's a very quick read and a very well-written book. And if you want the graduate course to that one, you may want to take a look at Mullins' I think it's The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. It's a thin book, it's only about 150 pages with a gold cover, a hardback. I think it was by Ed, somebody help me out here. I think it was Mullins.
All the people in Congress, who do you think has the best voice to promote your wishes with regard to the Constitution?
Well, it's not, well, I understand your question, but really I'm more concerned with the state legislatures who has the best voice, because they're the ones who can, what I'm asking, this is what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to lobby your state legislatures to repeal Florida's call for a constitutional convention. Now, in 2019, I got Joe Bruners to put a bill through Senate drafting, which I have a copy of the bill. And when the bill came out of Senate drafting, he was nice enough to give me a copy. And he said to me, look, I can't submit the bill. I said, okay, why not? He said, the term limits people told me if I submit it, they'll spend $200,000 to defeat me. So now we're getting into how politics really operates. So I didn't have $200,000 to say to him, well, I'll give you $200,000, or I'll give you $400,000. I didn't have that money to say that. I couldn't, obviously you'd have to do that through a PAC. So that's what happened. So the bill never got submitted. And then I had someone who was going to submit it in the House, and he told me, look, if Brutus is going to submit it in the Senate, it's a waste of time for me to submit it in the House, which is true. And if those of you who are not used to lobbying your representatives only get to submit 6 bills a year. Right, I don't know, 6 bills a year or 6 bills a session. I think it's 6 a year. And there's no limit on how many the senators can apply. But this bill is not covered by that, because it's a repeal of a prior action, so it doesn't count against their 6 bills. And some of them don't even know that. Some of them you tell them that and they don't know it. Yes, please. I want to make sure everyone hears you.
Sweet, thanks. We appreciate that. So to clarify, Florida Statute 1193 is a permanent application to call a convention, and therefore requires rescinding, or?
No,
go ahead.
Okay, so, was it 1193, I think it was, right?
That's what you got.
Yeah, 1193. So all what that is, they were so bamboozled, they actually passed a whole statute. It's a long statute too. It's 1193 and plus, a bunch of other paragraphs there on the, how Florida would control its delegates, which we already saw in the first one, you can't control it. And not only that, the convention, not only can they make their proceedings secret, but if they do what the Ford Foundation wants them to do, and they can do away with the states. So there wouldn't even be a state to control it. Right? It's pretty out and out obvious. So, what is it that we want repealed? If it's not that statute is not operational. It's a joke. Right? So, what do we want repealed? The way that the states call for a new constitutional convention is that they pass a resolution in both houses, except in Kansas, there's only one house. And they submit that to, I believe it's the Secretary of Congress and the Senate. So, I forget exactly who exactly the person who receives it, but the legislation just says they submit it to Congress. Did I answer that question satisfactorily?
Do we want to repeal the resolution? Is that?
Yeah, we want. If anyone is interested, I'll send you a copy of what we got out of Senate drafting, or I could even send you a copy of what we submitted, what I submitted to Brutus, which is a much longer bill, and it linked out to about 200 pages of information that they used to construct the Senate resolution that we have. And it's really, it just basically says all prior applications from Florida for a constitutional convention of repeal. That's what it says.
Question over.
Yes, sir.
So, is it currently only a resolution in Florida?
No. It's currently an application to the Congress.
Okay.
Right? In other words, they don't call it a bill because the governor doesn't get to sign it. Right, so the governor's out of the loop, thank God, because for some reason DeSantis likes the idea. I mean, maybe he just likes the money that he gets from, and I like DeSantis, don't get me wrong, but I totally disagree with him on this.
So, as we sit here tonight, what's this count on states that have sent the resolution to Congress?
Okay,
And how do they line up liberal to conservative?
okay, so it depends upon how you count, and I'm going to elaborate on that. The Wolfpack, they claim that they have 5 states that signed on to the issue. So here's what happened. The Convention of States said, oh, there's supposed, constitutional experts and all this. They kind of muddied the waters and they said, well, yeah, you can have a limited constitutional convention only for certain issues. But you have the bill, you have everything that's been done, you have it right there you have the laws, one sentence. Right? That can be interpreted however you want to interpret it. I interpret it the way it was written, right? What the words actually mean. But they try to say, well, this is a call for this, and this is a call for that, and these different issues. So, but really you can just add them all together, right? And you can come up with a number. But then you get into issues like, in 1895, New York State passed a call for a constitutional convention for the purpose of creating a Bill of Rights. They never repealed it. So you can count that. So if you do count that, they already have it. And not just that one. There's been calls for a constitutional convention and repeals all the way since the beginning of the country. Right? So whoever number you get, I mean, I'm sure the Convention of States has a number, and Publius Holder, which I think I gave you information that links to her, I think. Is that right? Is there a website in there? Do I have a website on what I handed out? Yeah, on the back. I'll just go over this real quickly. The real experts on this is John Birch Society and Joanna Martin, JD. She has a pen named Publius Holder. She is a tremendous constitutional expert. She was a JAG officer, and in I believe 1974 she was Assistant Attorney General for the state of Florida. She currently lives in the mountains up in Tennessee, and she is really absolutely positively committed to getting repeals and to stopping new states from making applications. And she goes around and speaks to state legislators. But the problem is, as great as her legal opinions are, there's no money behind it. Right? And there's a saying in legislatures, nothing for nothing. And that means if you're not coming with the green, you don't expect anything from us. Yes, sir.
What happens when a state legislature votes for a constitutional convention, whatever form, and all these people are voted out such that the next legislature is... What happens if the state legislature votes for a constitutional convention and the next go around they're voted out and the new legislature votes to kill it? I mean, is that, so it goes up and down? Is that the way it goes?
Yes. The problem is, that's exactly what happened back in the 80s. And they started, one state after another started repealing it, and that's when they changed their tactics as to how they were going to proceed. That's when they started marketing to the right instead of the left. And but the answer is But there's actually a little caution to that. A lot of times, you'll have people in the legislature who voted for the original bill. And then they don't want to change their vote because they say I was wrong the first time. So fortunately here in Florida we have term limits. And so people, right around now, most of the people who voted for these things, unless the guy did 8 years in the House and then did 8 years in the Senate, right, so they have some in there. Most of the people are new people now, so that's not as much of a problem in Florida. Right, that's not true in every state. Okay, the answer is yeah. They can send it in, they can repeal it, they can send it in, they can repeal it. The problem is when it's not repealed. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if New York's 1895 counts, and they have enough states, why hasn't it happened? Even if it's a bad thing, why have they not done it? And why would, like you said, Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, you think they'd be jumping all over this if it was such a great thing for them? Why haven't they done it if they had the numbers?
My suspicion, I mean, we don't know why it hasn't. My suspicion, and I admit it's mere suspicion, is that they're going to wait for some event and say we're having an emergency, we have to do this. They'll wait for some event to happen. And that's when we'll have the problem. But that's just a guess.
I mean, if they didn't do it for COVID, I don't know what they're going to do. What do they want for an event?
Well, this is COVID. This may be just a trial run. Yes, ma'am.
I escaped from New York about a little over a year ago. And thank you. And in the New York State Legislature, the lower house approved to rescind last session. It did not make it through the new session. So what they're going to do is reintroduce it this year to have it rescinded in both houses because, you know, it's a new section, they have to go through the process again. But some very clever person in New York, or people, sent around the rumor that all those wild patriots, all these crazy people, were the ones who would get to rewrite rewrite the Constitution, and it was too dangerous. So they flipped their own story on their own head. But that was the rumor on the street, and I know a couple of legislators, and that was a conversation in the House.
When it comes to these type of things, if we think back to the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, the bankers who actually wrote the bill went around the country denouncing it because at the time they were very unpopular. The purpose of the Federal Reserve Bank was supposed to be to break the grip of the money trust. The money trust was the New York banks. So after they went down to Jekyll Island and wrote the bill, they submitted it as a Republican bill that was submitted by Senator Aldrich, who was at the meeting. That went down because his name was attached to it, and the people said this is the bill of the bankers. So what they did is they got two Democrats to resubmit it. It was one was Glass, and the other one I think was Senator Glass, and I think it was Owens. It might have been Robert Owens in the House. I'm not sure about that. You can look it up, it's easy to find. And they reworded the bill, and then the bankers went out and denounced it so that it would pass. And it did pass. That's how they got it through. So they can be very tricky. You're talking about, these are people who are in the top 100th or 1,000% of people. They know what they're doing. And so it's very easy for them to fool you. They have all the information at their fingertips, and you're dependent upon how much misinformation on the internet. So that's it. So, in conclusion, I'd like to ask you to do a couple of things. The first thing I'd like you to do is, you should know this, when you are lobbying your representatives, I don't care if it's at the state level or the federal level, with the possible exception of the senators. If you put 35 people together, right, 35 people, they're thinking, every person who shows up is like 100 votes. So they feel like they're talking to like 3,500 people. Especially if you don't all appeal to be from the same group. They'll meet with you and they'll discuss your issue. What you should talk about is one thing. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be this issue, but once you go to the second issue, you get in the water. There's an organization that teaches how to lobby. Right? It's called the Federation for Applied Conservative Leadership. Right? And they do a course. I've taken it 4 times. I'm looking to go the 5th time. And they will show you that when you lobby your legislatures, you have a choice. Your choice is that you can be liked, you can have access, and you can be ineffective, or you can be hated, or you can be effective. And they teach you how to do that in one day.
Can you give us the name again?
Yeah, that's the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership. So, what I'm asking you to do is get together with your friends, neighbors, and the people in this room and have a meeting with your legislators, one-on-one. You 35 of you and one of them, and say, this is an important issue to us. Please take action on it. Hold his feet to the fire. The key is somebody's going to want to talk about some other issue. I got together once when Doug, this is going back more than 10 years. Doug Holdo was a representative at that time in the southern part of Sarasota County. And even though I was not in his district, I was requested to come with the group because they thought I could help express their interest. And did any of you, I know Dave does, but aside from Dave, does anyone know a lady, she's passed away now about 7 or 8 years ago, Kathy Bolam? She lived in Venice? No, okay. She was very well known in Sarasota County. She was a real patriot. She asked me to come. I said yes. And there was another lady, some of you may remember, Pat Wayman. She had a group, a 912 group of about 200-300 people in Venice. Anyway, she was there, and she had been to the course once. And there were like 3 or 4 other people. So I said, listen, I'm only going to do this if we meet at a restaurant before we meet with the representative. We go over our strategy. And we did that. We met like a block away from his office. And I explained the basics of what we had learned at the campaign, at the lobbying training. And Pat reinforced what I said. And by the time we got done, I could see they weren't going to do it. And we went over there, and people talked about every issue in the world. And it was so big that at the end, Doug Holder said to us, okay, so I don't understand. Why didn't you come to see me? He didn't even know why we were there. Because they had talked about everything in the world. When you go in, you talk about one issue. That's it, one. Not 2, not 1.5, one issue. You want to talk about a second issue? You have a second meeting. At that meeting, you talk about that one issue. Okay. I'm going to, Dave looks like he's ready to give me the hook. And I want to thank everyone for your attention. And the reason our country is in such a horrible condition is because our law, our Constitution, and our system is set up for the people to run it. So if the people don't run it, who's going to step in and run it? You already know. You already know the answer to that. Thank you very much.
Are you tired? Would you like to say a few words about what happened with the SOE appointment? Are you interested, Dave?
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight again. It's good to see more and more folks here. A couple of things, as secretary of the club. We want to grow our membership. We'd like to see more faces out there. So we are the grassroots movement. So the RLC needs to get out there, needs to get to those neighborhoods, get to those folks, get to your friends, your conservative friends, get them out there, get them involved.